So this text is divided thematically, and I'm going to be pulling from about 2 to 3 chapters, and there's the first one is we're gonna go in with the hard stuff, people. We're gonna go in with spirituality. Actually, the definition. I think the definition is here. My apologies. Aha, here we go. So, in this text, and she's going into it more deeply, scholar, theorist, writer, Buddhist, bell hooks, who's no longer with us in body on this plane of existence, but I feel she is with us in spirit, as we call her into this space. In this text, her central definition actually relies on the work of Erich Fromm. So I'm going to start there with the definition he provides. Hooks writes, in conclusion to his insightful work, The Art of Loving, written in the mid-50s but still relevant to today's world, psychoanalyst Erich Fromm courageously calls attention to the reality that the principle underlying capitalistic society and the principle of love are incompatible. He contends our society is run by managerial bureaucracy, by professional politicians. People are motivated by mass suggestion. Their aim is producing more and consuming more as purposes in themselves. The cultural emphasis on endless consumption deflects attention from spiritual hunger. We are endlessly bombarded by messages, Hooks write, telling us that every need can be satisfied by material increase. And she concludes this section by saying, because we are spiritually empty, we try to fill up on consumerism. We may not have enough love, but we can always shop. I feel like I was just I want to say called out, but because the more tender parts of me feel called out, but it's a call in. And I hope you receive that as a call in, because we all experience it. Or I speak for myself in saying, I definitely experience that. My knickknacks are a testament to it. Later on in that same chapter about spirituality, consumerism, spirituality, Hooks writes, a commitment to spiritual life, a commitment, requires us to do more than read a good book or go on a restful retreat. It requires conscious practice, a willingness to unite the way we think with the way we act. Spiritual life is first and foremost about commitment to a way of thinking and behaving that honors principles of interbeing and interconnectedness. When I speak of the spiritual, I refer to the recognition within everyone that there is a place of mystery in our lives where forces that are beyond human desire or will alter circumstances and or guide and direct us. And Hooks calls these forces divine spirit. When I hear interconnectedness, I hear our principles, our Unitarian Universalist principles. When I hear mystery and wonder, I hear our principles and sources. Now here's the definition, because I know people were waiting for it. Relying on Erich Fromm, Hooks writes, using a working definition of love that tells us it is the action we take on behalf of our own and another's spiritual growth. Love is the action we take on behalf of our own and another's spiritual growth. Provides us with the blueprint, beginning blueprint for working on the question and the issue of self-love. And I leave you with this one. Well, I don't leave you. We enter into the next phase. As we're listening right now for the different definitions that may be arising, maybe pulling from Hooks, maybe rejecting elements of Hooks, right? Asking where is justice in it? I have one thing to say from Hooks on justice. The heart of justice is truth-telling, seeing ourselves and the world the way it is rather than the way we want it to be. Seeing the world the way it is rather than the way we want it to be. So, I think this is what I ask. Where is the truth guiding you in this moment when you think of community, when you think of love and action in community? Is there a particular community that comes to mind? It could be this community. It can be another. It could be a familial group. It could be chosen family. Where are spaces in our lives that we're called to take action, to give of ourselves when it's hardest to do? I know I mentioned paper. And I'm wondering, do people have it on them? Yep, you got it? Great. And if you don't have a piece of paper and a pen, and you need it, and you'd like it, this is what I ask of you in beginning this work this morning. How would you define love? Would you be open to writing a definition of love? Is that hard to do? Yes. Why is it hard to do? Some people were nodding. If you feel like sharing, please share aloud. You don't have to. I mean, there's like a huge divide here. We're not in. But these aren't just rhetorical questions. I think that's why when I came across Hooks's definition 2 years ago, it blew me away because it included the spiritual element and engaging in acts for the spiritual betterment of oneself and another. How challenging is that? I think the next part that I'd invite you to think into and Because if we're talking about reflection and then practice, I think a lot of times it's easier to jump into what we think is the practice or the action, right? But then without that reflection, sometimes we get tripped up into why are we doing what we're doing, or how are we going to sustain that action? Or what kind of action are we engaging? Is the action loving? Are we listening to the needs to the people, ourselves included, who we've committed to serving, committed to loving? This is the real question. If you were to write a love letter to a community in your life, a community of people, of souls, however you take that to mean, what would you need to do to create the space to even get there? Would you need to walk outside and sit waiting for a shuttle to come by as you hear a downy woodpecker pecking? Would you need a quiet place by yourself, or do you need to sit in community? Is it a community letter that you're writing? And how does that letter fit into your definition of love? I'll close by saying, I feel like I didn't quite get to the love letter myself. I feel like it's still writing itself. I think it writes itself every Sunday. And I don't know what it's going to look like until a few months from now. But what I will say is that this congregation and the actions of the people in it, showing up for one another, showing up for me, showing up for themselves, naming when it is they need to rest. So many of you do that so well, trying to live into a new reality of what love in action for the spiritual betterment of another looks like. A few weeks back, and I know I said I was going to close, so this is the real closing. So a few weeks back, when I preached before, we had a reading from the book of Corinthians on love. I'm sure many people here have heard it at Christian weddings before. But that opening hymn that Vivian so aptly chose was echoing those biblical words. And that image of trying to live into what love is, that came from a letter from Paul to the people, that struggling community in Corinth, that struggling community that their hearts were struggling. I do not mean to make a direct comparison here to Corinth. Please don't get me wrong. But what I do mean to say is that the mode of a letter of love, when we show and tell one another in our community, the love that we see from them, the love that they give us, and what love is defined as for us, how we can grow aspirationally with one another so we understand one another's needs better. That's what I'd like to center. When we know what love is and what we need from it and how we can act in it, and we take the risk of naming that to one another, maybe it needs to be in written form first to get the gumption to then take that letter or deliver it to another. That kind of honesty and truth-telling leads to just acts and leads to justice.